I want to let you in on something that might unsettle you before it helps you. Some of the most perceptive, emotionally intelligent people alive right now, people who read rooms before anyone speaks, who feel the shift in a relationship weeks before it surfaces, who carry an almost uncomfortable awareness of everything happening around them, did not develop those abilities through books or practice or years of careful self-work. They developed them the same way you develop scar tissue. Slowly. Because they had to. Psychologists have started calling this traumatic intelligence, and if you have never heard that term before, that is exactly why this video matters. Because the people who have it are almost never told what they actually have. They are told they are too sensitive, too anxious, too much. They spend years treating a rare form of intelligence like a personality flaw, and that misidentification costs them something real. What follows are 7 signs, not a checklist to collect. A mirror to look into honestly. Here is what psychology actually tells us. Research in developmental neuroscience has consistently shown that children who grow up in emotionally unpredictable or complex environments develop a heightened sensitivity to social cues, nonverbal signals, and emotional patterns. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection and emotional processing center, becomes highly attuned through repeated activation. The result is a nervous system that is, in very measurable ways, differently calibrated than one that developed in stable conditions. Not damaged, differently wired, and in specific contexts, extraordinarily capable. You read people with an accuracy that sometimes unnerves even you. Someone walks into a room, and before they have opened their mouth, something in you has already clocked it. A micro-expression that crossed their face for less than a second. The way their shoulders are sitting differently than last week. A forced lightness in how they said hello. You do not decide to notice these things. You just do, involuntarily, continuously, like a background process that never fully closes. This is hypervigilance, and it did not appear from nowhere. When the emotional environment of early life was unpredictable, a parent whose moods shifted without warning, a home where the atmosphere could change before anything was said, the brain adapted. It built an early warning system. It became extraordinarily attuned to subtle signals because reading those signals was how you stayed safe. That system did not switch off when the conditions changed. It came with you, into every room, every relationship, every ordinary Tuesday that somehow feels heavier than it should. The discomfort is real. So is the capability. You knew things were ending before there was any evidence they were. You felt the shift in a friendship months before the friendship actually ended. You sensed something had changed in a relationship before a single conversation confirmed it. And when you tried to explain it to someone, you could not. Not really. It just felt true. And then it was. Trauma neuroscience research has consistently shown that traumatic experiences, particularly early ones, are encoded differently in the brain than ordinary memories. They bypass the verbal, conscious processing centers and are stored instead as felt sense, physical, immediate, prelinguistic. The body holds emotional knowledge that the prefrontal cortex has not yet caught up to. You feel the answer before you can argue for it. What looks irrational from the outside is a different kind of knowing. Your nervous system has access to emotional data your conscious mind has not yet assembled into language. That is not mysticism. That is the documented outcome of a brain that was trained early to process emotional information at a level most people simply do not operate at. The body keeps the score, and sometimes it keeps it before you even know a game is being played. You have made peace with complexity that most people find unbearable. Most people want resolution, the clean ending, the clear answer, the version of events where one person was right and one was wrong, and everything settles neatly. You understand that impulse, and you have also, somewhere along the way, stopped expecting it to be satisfied. You have accepted that someone can love you and still hurt you. That two things that feel like direct opposites can both be entirely true. That a person can be both the source of your damage and the source of something you are genuinely grateful for. Growing up in environments where reality was complicated, where the person who should have protected you also frightened you, where love and unpredictability lived in the same house, forces a kind of cognitive sophistication that simple, stable conditions do not produce. You learned early that the world does not sort neatly. And that knowledge, however painfully acquired, made your mind more capable of holding real complexity than most. The philosopher Nassim Taleb wrote about how fragile systems collapse under uncertainty while resilient ones adapt to it. Your mind, without anyone framing it this way, built itself into the second kind. Before we go further, if any of this is landing for you, hit subscribe right now. Every week, I go deeper into the psychology behind the things you notice about yourself that nobody has ever quite explained. 2 seconds. It matters. Now, back to where we were, because what comes next is where this gets harder and more important. You absorb other people's emotional states like they are your own. This goes beyond noticing that someone is struggling. When someone else's pain enters the room, it lands somewhere in your body. A stranger's story on a screen makes your chest do something specific. You sometimes cannot locate the boundary between what you are feeling and what the person near you is feeling. And untangling those two things requires real, deliberate effort. Psychology describes this as emotional contagion, the unconscious mirroring of others' emotional states. Everyone experiences it to some degree. People with traumatic intelligence experience it at a significantly higher intensity, because the same hyper-attunement that makes you exceptional at reading people means you also absorb what you read. The scanner does not stay neutral. It takes on what it detects. And this is where the video would be doing you a disservice if it only told you the flattering version, because these abilities carry a real cost. The pattern recognition misfires sometimes. Reading threat in situations that are genuinely safe, conflict into a harmless silence, withdrawal into an interaction that was simply neutral. The empathy tips into over-responsibility and leaves you carrying weight that was never yours. The constant scanning is exhausting in a way that is very difficult to explain to someone whose nervous system was never wired this way. These are not flaws in you, but they are real. And naming them honestly is more useful than wrapping everything in a gift bow. You sabotage things right at the edge of something good. You work towards something, a relationship, an opportunity, a version of your life that actually looks the way you want it to. And then, somewhere close to having it, something happens. You pull back. You pick a fight that did not need to happen. You convince yourself it was going to fall apart anyway and leave before you can be left. You do not want to fail. And yet, psychologists sometimes explain this through what is known as the window of tolerance, the range within which your nervous system can function without tipping into overwhelm. If safety and stability were not the baseline of your early environment, your brain may have encoded calm itself as a warning, because in your memory, the quiet was often what came just before something broke. Security does not feel like security. It feels like the moment before impact. And so the brain, trying to protect you, engineers the ending before it can be taken from you. Recognizing this is one of the more disorienting things a person can do, because it reframes the self-sabotage not as weakness, but as a survival response that outlasted the conditions that created it. You think compulsively about the why behind everything, not in a philosophical, occasional way, in a can't-turn-it-off way. Why did they say it like that? Why does this situation feel familiar when it has never technically happened before? Why do I react this way? And what does that reaction actually mean about me? You narrate your internal experience with the same level of analysis most people reserve for professional problems, and it runs continuously, whether you want it to or not. Research on what psychologists call post-traumatic growth, the genuine cognitive and emotional development that can follow adversity, identifies increased existential depth and a more elaborated inner life as real, measurable outcomes. Viktor Frankl described the human need to make meaning from suffering. The mind that was forced to make sense of something that made no sense gets very, very good at searching for meaning. It does not always find it. But the searching changes the architecture of how you think, permanently, and in ways that produce a depth of insight most people simply do not have access to. You know your patterns, you can name them, and you still watch yourself do them anyway. You can trace the origins of your reactions with real clarity. You can explain them to a therapist, to a close friend, to yourself at 2 a.m. with uncomfortable precision, and then the situation arises, and you watch yourself do the thing anyway, the withdrawal, the deflection, the self-protective move that you know is self-protective, and do regardless. That gap between knowing and changing is one of the quieter, more devastating aspects of this kind of intelligence, because awareness is not the same as healing. It is a beginning, a real one. But the brain does not update through insight alone. It updates through new experience, repeated enough times in a body that slowly learns it is safe to respond differently. That process is slower than understanding. It requires more than reading the right book or having the right conversation, and it does not mean the intelligence was wasted. It means you have been doing something extraordinarily hard for a long time with very few people who understood what it actually cost. Research on post-traumatic growth by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun has shown that a significant portion of people who navigate genuine adversity emerge with a deeper philosophical clarity, stronger relational attunement, and a more developed sense of what actually matters. The intelligence is not separate from the difficulty. In many cases, it was built directly by it. That does not mean the difficulty was worth it. It does not mean you would choose it again. What it means is that the sharpness you carry, the way you read people, the complexity you can hold, the meaning you insist on finding, these are not coincidences. They are the architecture of a mind that had to grow quickly in conditions that required it, and they are yours, not despite what happened, because of how you moved through it. The question now is not how you got here. The question is what you choose to do with the intelligence you built along the way. So tell me something honestly. Out of these 7 signs, which one felt most like you? And more than that, has anyone in your life ever actually seen it for what it is? Or has it always just looked like anxiety or sensitivity or being difficult from the outside? Leave it in the comments. I read them, and the answers are almost always more interesting than the video that prompted them. If this gave you a different language for something you have been carrying for a long time, save it or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. I go deeper on this every week.